Hello, welcome to the debate on Sky News. I'm Martin Stanford. Here's our take on developments brought together from America, the UK and around the world. Trump card or Joker in the pack? Is Donald damaging the grand old party? After 18 months of talks, would a nuclear deal with Iran make the world a safer place? And the grass ceiling. Team USA's back on top of the world, but do we have equality on the pitch? Never a man to mince his words, Donald Trump's comments about Mexicans threaten to make mincemeat of the Republican Latin vote. In the last few weeks, the businessman has suggested immigrants crossing the border into the USA are bringing drugs, crime, even disease. The story rumbles on as Trump defends his comments and his rivals attack him for making them. Well, as usual, let's bring in our special guests, Democrat commentator Jeffrey Robinson and the Conservative commentator Armstrong Williams. Jeffrey, is Trump really helping the GOP?
Oh, I love him. Listen, full disclosure, I know Donald, and I like him a lot. He's a very likable guy, and he was very generous to me when I wrote a novel about his building on Fifth Avenue. It's a Harold Robbins-esque kind of novel called Trump Tower, and that's a naked plug. And so Donald and I get along very well. Is he going to get the nomination? No. Do I agree with what he says? No. Will he become president? No, but he's very good value. He was actually created by the conservative wing, the Tea Party wing, and he is exposing the Republicans for what they are, a bunch of two-faced phonies. I love him.
Armstrong, he's not doing the GOP any favours. Is he doing lasting damage, do you think?
You know, we're a nation that gets so caught up in the soundbite and what makes the headlines, and the international press follows suit without digging any deeper. And what he was trying to convey, because I certainly don't believe that he's a bigot or racist, that he's anti-Mexican. I think what he was trying to do was convey a deeper point. When a lot of these people who are in jail, who just happen to be some members of the Mexican gangs, and the kind of terror that they rain on people's lives. It has been documented within the last few days about the rape and the terror. And people wonder why Donald Trump continues to soar in the polls among GOP voters. It's not because they're lost in the sauce and don't understand what's going on. Immigration is a real problem. We do not have what is necessary to vet people that are crossing these borders, who come in this country, who find themselves just easily integrating with the rest of society. But some of these people, a very small percentage of them, don't mean the society any good. They bring the same habits from where they're from to our country, and they wreak havoc on people's lives, and many of these people are in jail. I guess Donald Trump should have been a little more eloquent about it, but it's becoming a real debate in the media, and I guess some of the media tried to sensationalize it in the beginning and to write it off as a jokester, but he had quite a lot of merit to what he was trying to convey. He just did not convey it as well.
Well, OK, I think we probably agree on that. But let me bring in Joe Tuckman here, who's joining us now from Mexico City. Joe, welcome to our programme. How have the comments gone down there?
Well, they've been taken as what they really are, which is extremely offensive and also untrue. I mean, really, the idea that it's easy to cross the border hasn't been true for many years now, and it's been getting increasingly difficult in the last few years. And Mexicans here know that the vast majority of Mexicans going to the States are hard-working people just looking for a way of supporting their families.
But Mexicans can't deny that there are some nefarious elements. I mean, you can argue about the percentages. There are some ne'er-do-wells getting over the border and causing trouble in America too, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody denies that, but that's not what Donald Trump said. I mean, he said that, and there are some, what was the phrase was something like, I assume there are also some good people. I mean, that's extremely offensive to the vast majority of Mexicans. And it's something also that powerful people in Mexico can use to bring the country together, because it's so obviously unfair. A country that is very divided on many issues, including security and including the failure of the government and of the economic system to provide jobs for those migrants who are leaving. That's something that the extremeness of those comments means that those people can come together.
Jeffrey Robinson, it reminds everybody of any persuasion, I suppose, of this porous border issue. Is this going to be a real talking point, do you think, over the next 12 months?
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, Armstrong's perfectly right. Donald, listen, he fires from the hip and he gets things wrong. He's wrong about Mexico, of course, and he can be very offensive in his way of saying things. But he's absolutely right to bring up immigration because the Republicans have been avoiding it for 2 years. Instead, they wanted to obliterate Obamacare. They wanted to stop gay marriage. They've been on all sorts of social things. And when the chips are down, they have failed, categorically failed, to come up with a satisfactory immigration solution. And Donald Trump is showing those fissures in the Republican policy. That's all. He's totally right to bring it up. It is a huge problem. The border is porous. And I'm afraid that Joe's slightly wrong in that there are a lot more undesirables coming across that border with drugs, bringing guns back, bringing money back. It's got to be stopped, and there's got to be a solution. The Republicans simply don't want to deal with it. Look at Jeb Bush's wimpy answer. Look at Marco Rubio's turnaround on immigration. They're all a bunch of wimps. They're afraid to deal with it, and Donald is standing up and saying, you have to.
Armstrong, is it the case the American economy can withstand, if not actually need, further immigration? And therefore, the government of whatever hue, the next president, whoever it is, needs to sort this out? Because in some sense, you need more people coming to America, don't you?
You know, I think that's one of the biggest myths in this country is that everyday Americans are not willing to take the jobs that many of these migrant guest workers are willing to take. And that's just not true. I mean, especially in the economy that we're in now, there are many people that seek these jobs, and many of these jobs are not available because they're able to exploit these migrant workers that pay them scraping the barrel wages, where it's almost impossible for someone to even have an opportunity to even compete for the jobs. I mean, what they do, they lower the kind of money, the standards of what people should be making, because these people are equally exploited. Many of them cannot speak the language when they go to the hospitals. Oftentimes they're misdiagnosed. The lawyers use them. The people who bring them in this country use them. And not only should we protect the American labor force, but we should also protect these migrant workers that come here from being further exploited and taken advantage of. There are many Americans that will work these jobs. Yes, these people bring talents, they bring gifts, they're hardworking. Many of these people are God-fearing people, they're Christians, they go to church on Sunday, they're trustworthy, and they do very good work. But it's not to say that there are not Americans here who would not do the same and bring the same to the workforce.
Joe Tuckman, why do so many Mexicans still want to make it to America? What's the incentive?
Well, the primary incentive is the lack of jobs or the lack of decent jobs in Mexico. Mexico's been, you know, about half the population lives in poverty. There's the growth levels are extremely mediocre when there is growth. It's just not kind of working. It's not providing enough jobs and enough security for the people of Mexico, and that's why they go. There's also obviously a long tradition of people going, so there's that there as well, and going and coming back and going and coming back. And one of the main issues about the increasingly difficult border, the increasingly closed border, is that actually encourages organized crime. It puts migrants in the hands of organized crime because it is so difficult to cross.
Jeffrey Robinson, the Latino vote is much thought to be a significant part of any election process. But where is the significance? Can any president get elected without it?
Well, the significance is in Florida, for example, and in Arizona, and in Texas, and in New Mexico. Texas is becoming a purple state. The Republicans are losing their grasp on Texas because of the Latino vote. But Armstrong raises a point which I really want to get back to, and it's the right point about these workers and how they're being exploited. One of the things that needs to be done, and again, the Republicans have avoided this for the past 2 years that they've controlled Congress. One of the things that really needs to be done is to go after the employers and stop them from hiring illegal workers. That can be done, and everybody should be able to agree on that. That will stop a lot of the problem. If these people can't get jobs, many of them will stop coming to America illegally looking for those jobs. Get to the employers, in a sense, follow the money. Stop them from hiring illegal workers under criminal penalty, and some of this will dry up.
Yeah, but that's a sort of free market issue, isn't it? I can't see Armstrong agreeing with you on that. Can I, Armstrong?
No, and you know, I just find it fascinating that my brother on the liberal side just wants to blame this immigration and lay it at the doorsteps of Republicans. I mean, the Democrats are just as bad as the Republicans. They all want that vote. And it's not whether or not that vote would make a difference. They believe that vote would make a difference. And I think Joe and I might agree on something this morning. Most of these people, for the most part, usually vote conservative. They have very strong traditional values, very strong social values. They are with the Republican Party on many of the issues. It's just when it comes to these issues that when it comes to immigration, the DREAM Act, and obviously President Obama passing the DREAM Act, garnered a lot of support for President Obama in his base. But for the most part, if you look at Texas and you look at places like Florida and even Ohio, they're normally the swing vote that makes the difference for Republicans. So I don't know what Jeffrey's talking about, that these people are going to eventually end up voting for Democrats. No, they vote their values, and their values are very traditional.
Not on this planet, they're not. Not
well,
on this.
We are on different planets.
Yeah, absolutely, because you look at the Latino vote, and they are not a Republican vote. They are absolutely not. That's why all the Republicans are so worried about trying to come up with voter registration acts, which will exclude them. That's why you've got all sorts of terrible programs aimed at keeping them from the democratic process, because Texas, for example, is becoming a purple state. Absolutely. The Latino vote is changing that. Look at the politicians.
Okay, well, let me toss the same thought to Joe. I know you speak to us from Mexico City. What's your take on how significant the relationship with Mexico in general and the Latino vote in particular will be in the next year, Joe?
Often when migrants leave Mexico, they're forgotten in Mexico, apart from the money they send back. It's not in the interest of, for example, the Mexican government to make a big deal about Mexican migrant rights in the US or the Latino vote, because in one way it reflects very badly on Mexico, not because they're criminals and rapists that are going, but because they're people who are escaping an untenable situation within Mexico. So the Mexican government is actually very passive on migrants within the bilateral relationship, and they say nothing ever about the Latino vote.
Joe Tuckman in Mexico, thank you very much indeed. A reminder, you can catch up with Sky News Debate on Apple TV, on Roku, and catch up, and of course, at skynews.com/US. Now, it's been 2 years in the making, a deal on Iran's nuclear future. The West promises an end to economic sanctions in return for assurances that Tehran will not develop nuclear weapons. But can a deal and a thaw in the relationship between the West and Iran make the world a safer place? Well, let's speak to Shahin Gobadi from the National Council of Resistance of Iran. That's a coalition of Iranian opposition movements. Shahin is also a thermonuclear engineer. Thank you for being with us today. This deal, I guess, still not absolutely nailed down, but is the objective to get a good deal? Is the motive behind that the right motive to have right now?
Well, thank you for having me in your program. I should say one has to have no illusions about the fact that why we are today. Look, the Iranian regime has been striving to obtain nuclear weapons for the past almost 3 decades. This program has all the markings of a weapons program and has all the ingredients of a weapons program. And there is no other logical reason for the Iranian regime to be so insistent on continuing this program, because according to the regime's own assessments, which have obtained, this does not make any sense economically. So having said this, the man who has to make the ultimate decision is Ali Khamenei, the Iranian regime's supreme leader. And now why the talks have dragged on for so long? Simply because Khamenei is in a major deadlock, he's in a major impasse. For the past 2.5 decades, he has invested so much on obtaining nuclear weapons as a guarantor for survival of his regime. On the other hand, in the past few years, the economic sanctions have started to biting, and he realizes the Iranian people are more restive than ever, and he's very much fearful of mass uprisings similar to what we witnessed in 2009. So simply put, he's caught between a rock and a hard place. And that's why, if I may use the term, he wants to have the cake and eat it too. What do I mean?
Yeah, but Shahin, just to interject here, he's not going to be allowed. If we take at face value what the negotiators are telling us from John Kerry and everybody else, he's not going to be able to have his cake and eat it too, is he? Well, let me bring in Jeffrey Robinson, who's in New York, as you know, and Armstrong Williams in Washington at this point. Armstrong, if our guest is right, everyone, the president included, is wasting their time. This isn't going to be a workable deal.
You know, Dr. Shahin is so refreshing. There's nothing that he said that I disagree with. And even just add, not to take anything away, the no notice inspection, the elimination of the current stockpile of this enrichment uranium. You got the term of the deal, which is going to be subject to the end of this liquidation of the Iranian program as an outline of their NPT. And listen, and also, and he makes this point, sanctions should be lifted progressively as Iranians show that their good behavior is validated. They don't want any of this. And what Dr. Shahin just said is so clear. Their only goal is to guarantee the Khomeini what he's always promised, that they have nuclear weapons for their own protection and the destruction of others. And it's just so frustrating to watch these brilliant people like Kerry and the president sit and negotiate with these people who are laughing at them, who have no intentions of following the guidelines. Their only agenda is to get this enrichment, be able to complete what they've already started, and we're going to become the laughingstock of the world. Because what you're going to do, what is going to end up happening is you're going to have a nuclear Middle East, because the Saudis are not going to sit by and watch Iran gain this kind of nuclear strength. The Israelis are not going to sit by and watch it. I mean, it's a very dangerous situation for us down the road.
Jeffrey, why do you think they're persevering with the talks?
I think they're persevering on the hope against hopes that they can get a real deal, and a real deal would be great. I mean, Shahin's absolutely right, and to some extent Armstrong is as well. It's when he started saying that we'd become the laughingstock of the world. That's when I had to get off the boat with him. But a real deal would be terrific, because a real deal would mean full inspections to guarantee that they were not building a nuclear weapon. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that Kerry and the president and the entire State Department staff, who are in many cases not political, are not going to let the wool be pulled over their eyes. We're not going to get a deal that goes halfway and lift the sanctions. It's pretty much all or nothing, and I'm afraid it's going to be nothing, because Shahin, and to that extent that Armstrong is right, are both right.
Shahin Gobadi, the level of trust between, well, a lot of countries and Iran actually is pretty bad, perhaps between America as a nation and America's government and the Iranian government is very difficult too. Can that even be overcome even after these months and months of meetings and summits?
You see, one has to be very clear here. The key word here is transparency, not trust. What do I mean? The Iranian regime should come clear with its past military aspects of the nuclear program. And that's where they are hiding their skeleton in the closet, because they know if they allow snap inspections, if they allow verification system, people will find out that this is a nuclear weapons program, and basically all their bluffs will be called and become real nature of this program be known. So that's why they keep on repeating the word, trust building, trust building. But the key phrase here is transparency. And as Madam Mariam Rajavi, the president-elect of the Iranian resistance, has said time and over, unless there is, absolute access to any side, being military or non-military, access to the Iranian scientists by the IAEA, clearance on the past military dimensions, as long as Iranian nuclear stock is transferred out of Iran, and as long as the UN Security Council resolutions are implemented, there is no way you can guarantee that all the pathways to the bomb has been closed. And if I may add another point very quickly, track record is very important here. For the past 2 decades, and particularly in the past 12 years, since the Iranian resistance and the National Council of Resistance of Iran revealed existence of such a secret program, particularly in Natanz and Iraq, the attitude of the political regime vis-a-vis IAEA international community has been hide and seek, catch me if you can. You cannot find one single site that the Iranian regime has voluntarily exposed to the IAEA. You cannot find one project that this regime has told IAEA voluntarily. They have only acknowledged them after they have been caught, completely red-handed, when other sources like the Iranian resistance and others have told so much on them that there was no other choice. So what I'm saying is, with this kind of a background, talking about trust is simply misplaced. The issue here is transparency, And as I said, unless these measures are taken, there's no way you can guarantee that all the pathways to the nuclear bomb is closed.
Jeffrey Robinson, would you trust the Iranians?
No, of course not. There's no reason to trust them. Transparency is great, but trust is a result of transparency. And this deal is never going to get through Congress if the trust factor isn't there. Transparency is a big part of it. But the Iranians have shown absolutely no reason to trust them. And unless they come forward with something concrete, it's just not going to happen. I don't think it's a waste of time. I think it was worth the try. But I don't think we should have any high hopes.
Yeah, and let's put that point to Armstrong. It's worth a try, and in a sense, isn't the keeping talking about it, Armstrong, better than not talking about it at all, and therefore maybe they go ahead and build a nuke anyway?
No, because they're buying their time. And I think we should listen to Dr. Shahin, because what we have here is a quadri factor. Every aspect of the agreement fails, not only on the key points, but also on the meaningless points. There are no points where you find any victory or anything that gives you hope, from their history to the transparency, to the fact of their stalling, and to the fact why they're doing this. It's not because it's a principled position. They want to make sure that they get a further grip of power in the Middle East, and they're willing to lie, deceive. They don't operate from the same principles of integrity and character and honor and your word meaning something that the West operates from. It does not exist. That is the starting point. If they don't have that as a starting point, then there's nothing to discuss, because everything is based on your word, and their word over the past 12 years, as Dr. Shahin has said, has been meaningless.
So, Shahin Gobadi, as a final thought, they should all just pack up and go home.
Well, I think the West, and particularly the U.S., has made too much concession already. The issue is why Tehran has to be rewarded for lying and cheating and concealment and deception all these years. So I think any principled policy, as I said, will look for somewhere else for change. The narrative that you either go for bomb or you make a deal with the mullahs, I think, is a wrong narrative. There is another choice. Go for change from inside Iran. Reach out to the Iranian people. Reach out to the Iranian resistance for democratic change, for true change. And in my opinion, the ultimate solution is the regime change in Iran by the Iranian people and the organized resistance. Because the idea that even if you make a deal with this regime, their policies vis-a-vis their transgression in the region, their abuses inside the country, their support for terrorism is going to ebb, I think is delusional at best.
Okay.
The regime is not going to give up on its pillars of power, and I think by giving them, concessions and loosening up sanctions, you simply embolden them. You are not going to change the course.
Shahin Gobadi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Next, winners once more. The US women's national team has taken home the World Cup for the third time. The players have won the admiration of the nation with record-breaking viewing figures in their clash against Japan. But can they now claim equal ranking with their male counterparts on the sports field? Has women's sport reached equality? Let's bring in Jeffrey and Armstrong. Armstrong, you go first. How are the ladies doing in your mind?
Struggling. And they struggle because while they won the championship and they should be applauded, you just don't have the corporate sponsors around the country that pay for it, and nor are the women filling the seats. They just can't. Not like the men who have the sponsors, who have the cachet, and have just a throng of supports all around the country. I mean, there are very few sports and where women are involved that truly generate the kind of pay that men receive. And the only exception probably is golf and tennis. I mean, you look at the Williams sisters, Serena Williams, you look at Maria Sharapova. Those are two athletes that's on the Forbes list of the highest paid women in the country. It's because it's a global sport, global sponsorship. They have a brand. People know who they are and they're following. Soccer does not have that level of participation. The market has to dictate that. And not just because they're women, but you got to demand that you play a caliber game that makes it so scintillating that sponsors and people around the world want to watch it and fill the stadiums. And that's just not happening.
And Jeffrey, I mean, take another global game, like golf, for instance. The women get poorer purses when they win good golf tournaments, don't they?
Not only do they do that, but at tennis, it was only until the women put their foot down and said you're a bunch of misogynist pigs that you got to pay us the same kind of money, and still they don't. Now, let me straighten Armstrong out about the numbers, because he's dead wrong about them. The fact is that 27 million people watched the U.S. team win the World Cup. Only 17 million people watched the men's World Cup final. So the women scored 50% better than that. More people in this country watched the women's final than watched the 7th game of last year's World Series or the 6th and deciding game this year of the NBA or the Stanley Cup. Women's soccer is the single most popular women's game in the world. The men received $8 million simply for showing up in Brazil and losing. The women got $2 million for winning. It is absolute misogyny. They're pigs. FIFA is a bunch of pigs. Sunil Gulati, who's head of the U.S. soccer, who put the medals on these women, smiling with his phony garbage smile, knowing that he had forced them to play on turf when they wouldn't dare do that to the men, knowing that there was sponsorship, knowing that they'd sold out the stadium, knowing what the viewing figures were, embraced them and said, oh, well, we will continue to treat you like second-class citizens. I will remind you that Blatter said women would get a better attendance if they wore shorter uniforms. I mean, it is just disgusting the way the women are treated. They are winners. They have proved themselves winners, and there is money. There really is. It has to do with the fact that there are too many misogynists running soccer to give them a break.
And Armstrong, even over here in the good old UK, there was an unfortunate tweet, I think, about congratulations to our women's soccer team. They can now come back to being mothers and daughters, as if their football didn't really add up to very much.
It was worse than that. Martin, it was worse than that when one of the major newspapers in Britain made a comment about saying that anybody who criticized the men's game in favor of the women's game were sexist. I mean, that disgusting reaction. The women deserve they deserve them.
Well, listen, what we just witnessed with women's soccer is more of the exception than the rule. You have moments like this all the time in men's sports and in men's soccer, and I know why some people may find it offensive, and that person meant it to be offensive. But being a mother and raising children is one of the highest honors and most important jobs this world could ever have. So I think that is a high honor and a compliment for men and women and the men who support their families and raise good children who contribute to society. So I definitely don't see that as an insult or offensive.
Armstrong, Jeffrey, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for being with us this week. That's it for this edition of The Debate. You can continue watching Sky News on Apple TV, Roku, on Catch Up, and of course on skynews.com. Until next time, goodbye.